Well, hello there, watching the press preview. A first look, of course, at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines with the political editors of The Sun and The Guardian, Harry Cole and Pippa Crerar. Great to see both of you. So to the front pages then, let us start with the Metro, leading with the Met Police investigating a claim that Russell Brand sexually assaulted a woman in 2003. He denies any allegations of wrongdoing in relation to all the claims against him. The Daily Mirror also leading on the news that the police are now involved. The Eye also features the fallout from the allegations as food bank and drug addiction charities sever ties with the comic. The Guardian leads with a warning from the Metropolitan Police that it may take years to root out rogue officers throughout the capital, with nearly 1,000 officers either suspended or on restricted duties. As Sir Keir Starmer prepares to meet the French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris tomorrow, the Daily Mail says the Labour leader has been accused of Brexit betrayal over his plans to rewrite the UK's deal with the European Union. The international edition of the Financial Times details the EU's condemnation of Poland, Hungary and Slovakia after the countries banned Ukraine grain imports. And The Star has some advice for parents who want their kids to grow up to be tall. Show them a bit of love, the paper claims. And a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So let's head to Harry and Pippa. Welcome to both of you. Lovely to see you here as well. And Pippa, why don't you kick off then? Because the news today on Russell Brand, which is once again dominating the newspapers, is that it seems the police are now involved.
Yes, we had 3 very serious allegations over the weekend of rape and sexual assault and grooming against Russell Brand. And the latest development today seems to be that the police have received a 4th allegation dating back to 2003. And we know it's the 4th one because, as the Sunday Times and Dispatches told us, the existing allegations were from 2006 onwards. No very little detail other than that at this stage, other than that the police have said that that they've spoken to the media organisations, that they've encouraged people to come forward, no matter how long ago these alleged incidents took place, and that they haven't yet said whether they've begun a criminal investigation or indeed any arrest. But is obviously looking very serious, and the police's action today has led to the tour which Russell Brand is currently on being cancelled by the promoters. I think there's 3 dates already being canned, and obviously his relationship with his publishers looks under threat as well. While we wait and see what actually happens as a result of those allegations.
Yeah, paused was the publisher said, wasn't it? Paused. Yeah, the Eye picking up on the live tour. Axed, they say, axed, postponed, I think was the official argument. Windsor, Plymouth, those dates gone. It's interesting, isn't it, that, the encouragement for other women to come forward, Russell Brand denying it, because there is a school of thought that the accused should have their privacy respected as well as the accusers. I don't know, where people stand on that suggestion.
Well, I think we're in a really strange time at the moment because there's been a number of incidents in the last year or so where it's been very obvious that someone's been accused of wrongdoing, they've been arrested, but under a recent Supreme Court ruling, actually their right to privacy in this country trumps their right for the media to name them. But in so many cases, so many times, if the person's name is out there, other people come forward. And you can have a whole debate about a trial by media, but I think this story needed a critical mass of that incredibly well-sourced, well-researched, powerful intervention by the 3 news organisations, The Times, Channel 4, The Sunday Times. Mm-hmm. And now that has happened, I think this story is almost taking on a sort of snowball element to it. And I think it can only be a good thing if people now finally do have the courage, knowing there are other people out there, to come forward. And there are a million reasons why people might not have gone to the police before, thinking they were alone, a lone voice in it. I think there was a really powerful quote in the Sunday Times from one of the alleged victims who said, I was always, ever since I was 16, I was just waiting to open the newspapers one day and read this guy has been accused of all these things, and it just never happened. So eventually I got to the stage where I had to do it myself. And I think we're going to see a sort of this story is going to run and run. I suspect there's going to be quite a lot more to come on this one.
Well, as you said already, it is already happening. The publisher, the postponement of the tour, the police now involved, which a number of the newspapers have picked up on. Is that the next natural step, do you think, for there to be an investigation? Or do the police still have to wait for people to come to them?
Well, obviously, they need to, it makes it a lot easier for them to have an investigation if they can speak directly to people, and that's what they've encouraged them to do. They can, obviously, without launching a formal investigation, preemptively look into it and see whether that formal investigation can take place. But there's also, in parallel with this, obviously the police investigation, but there's also the internal inquiries being conducted by the various broadcasters who Brandon previously worked for, notably Channel 4 and the BBC. They, unfortunately, in recent times, major broadcasters have had plenty of experience of having some of their stars in the public eye, facing allegations along these lines, and presumably have learnt from that experience that it's really important to be on it immediately, to be transparent, to make sure that all the rules were followed. And we'll see, presumably, in the coming days whether that is the case. I know, for example, that the Culture and Media Committee of the House of Commons is meeting tomorrow to consider whether to haul those media chiefs in front of it and to decide whether to quiz them about this. So potentially it's very difficult for them as well. So there's these two elements in parallel. There's sort of the employers bit, if you like, and also the police. But obviously the serious bit of it is the police.
There's huge pressure. The Met's reputation, as we've discussed so many times over the last few months and years on these paper reviews, the Met's reputation is at rock bottom. They are going to be under a huge amount of pressure to get this right, but they can only really act within those tramlines if people are coming forward.
And one of the allegations we heard over the weekend was that if Russell Brand had got a job at one of these organisations, one of these media organisations, the discussion would be to pull all the women, all the production staff that are women off the job. So, I know a womaniser does not make a rapist, and he had a self-confessed reputation as a promiscuous, effectively a sex addict, I suppose. But does that show that those organisations knew that his reputation was coming before him, and actually there was a failure to act at that point, if that allegation is right?
I suspect that probably does. And also there's the allegation of using BBC resources to send cars to various places. And look, it has been an open secret. There's almost an element of, I can't believe it's taken this long for this story to happen. Obviously, the meticulous research and
he denies all the allegations.
He does deny all the allegations, obviously, but I thought we were discussing earlier, one of the most powerful bits of the Dispatches documentaries when they spliced actual quotes from Russell Brand on television, broadcasting to the nation, saying outrageous things that in this context now have an utterly chilling viewpoint.
Yeah. And it's broader than this as well, isn't it? I mean, the reason I think this is so powerful is not because it's one individual celebrity who might have particularly unique circumstances around why some of these allegations haven't come out sooner. It also speaks to the experience that women up and down the country have. If they are unfortunately subject to this sort of assaults when they go to the police. And I've been really quite shocked today by how my Twitter feed, my X feed, whatever we're supposed to call it these days, has been full of women telling their stories about how they've gone to the police with allegations over the years and not been taken seriously, or in fact haven't gone to the police because of the reputation, not just the Met, but across the country, of these allegations not being taken seriously. And that's a real problem for the police. And I know that there are people within the police, good people, trying to counter that. But still a lot of people think, well, nothing's going to happen if I complain, so why do I bother?
But this is why the attacks on the media don't work. They say this guy's got a right presumption to innocence. Yes, he has a right to the presumption of innocence in the eyes of the state. Yeah. That is a fact of life that this country is built on. You do not have a right of innocence in public eye, and if you can present a case which he's denied broadly and says there's evidence that contradicts each other, he hasn't explained what that is. So he has a right to innocence in the eyes of the law, but frankly, the court of public opinion, I think, is.
Yeah, and your argument is if the media didn't do it, then who else is stepping in? We move on. Daily Mail has got Russell Brand on the front cover, but also a story about Sir Keir Starmer heading off to glad hand, if I can put it that way, President Macron of France. Harry, you kick off on this one.
He's in Paris.
What's he up to? Yeah, what's he up to in terms of Brexit? That's
I think he's up to is there's a really weird little time now between party conference where he's probably, although Keir Starmer has moved a long way with with his party. He doesn't really want to be having arguments about small boats and Brexit and things like that at party conference. There's a sort of dead window of news which have got in this sort of 2 weeks between the MPs returning from their summer break and their jetting off back to party conference. And Starmer has decided to use this time to be Mr. International Diplomacy. He's trying to show Sun readers, Sky viewers, Guardian readers what it would look like if Keir Starmer was on the world stage. Now, that's all very well, and the pictures have all been great. I was with him at The Hague last week, and he can do it. He's totally do it. He's a former director of public prosecutions. He's been in Europe before at the various courts. He can do it. However, the problem is that actually foreign policy and Brexit policy and international policy and small boats policy is some of the trickiest and thorniest bits of Labour's problem. And so, yes, he's got really good images, but he's walked into a few bear pits.
I think that's precisely why he's done it now. Labour wants to get on the front foot. They want to try and control the narrative rather than it being sprung on them by, external events, by a bit of legislation going through the Commons. And at least this way, they can see, Keir Starmer's advisers can see these are difficult issues for them that they need to kind of like thrash out now, a year out or maybe even 8 months out from a general election. Now's the moment to do it. And Brexit is one of the biggest. And they feel that they've got to a point where, for a long time, they didn't want to talk about it.
For obvious reasons. Like the front page of the Daily Mail, page 2 of the Sun tomorrow.
But then the fact that they now are talking about it, that, he's done an interview with the Financial Times yesterday from Montreal, from this Global Progressives conference, Centrist Dads conference, as it's commonly known. I think it does show that they want to try and tackle it head on. It's an interesting development. And while Labour policy for some time has been to, when it comes to this review in 2025 of the TCA, of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the trade deal basically between the EU and the UK, that's been Labour policy for a while. But it's kind of like the fact they've chosen to talk about it now, the fact that he's done an interview, ended up on a front page, the fact that he talked about the future and his children and the impact on them, and also the fact that when we've spoken today to Labour aides and Labour figures, they have a quite clear idea of how wide they want to be, making very clear that they're not renegotiating Brexit. They don't want to go into the customs union or indeed the single market again. But there are other elements to it.
But the problem is, it's not just Brexiteers that are criticised. It's Brussels experts, watchers of the EU have said, hang on, this is deluded. The actual delusion was the word used. There's only one way. Some of them. There's only one way you're going to get a better deal, quote, better deal from the EU, which is what he said he's going to do, and that is you've got to give them something. And a little bit like the policy he got himself a little bit tied up in knots with last week about small boats, whether he'd enter into some Europe-wide, not necessarily EU, but Europe-wide scheme. Burden sharing scheme. And it's suddenly, you just start to see an image of a man, which I think the government would like to paint, of his stock response to everything is more Europe. And that if he walks into that trap too much, I think they're going to be very easy to paint him as a sort of Europhile that he is.
Yes,
in key seats.
And burden sharing when 7,000 migrants arrive on Lampedusa. Watch out.
It's not used to being back here.
There's water going everywhere, yeah. Then that starts to look like a difficult non-policy, although he's denied it, hasn't he? Harry, your favourite story?
Which one? There's so many.
The Guardian has it on the front. Liz Truss, who crashed the economy? Truss blames the bank, but not herself.
It wasn't just the bank, it was the bank, the BBC, it was people who've been to dinner parties in North London. I think the Guardian came in for a criticism there. It was the Bank of England, it was economists, it was the OBR. It was other people in the Tory party. People in the Tory party were sold out to the anti-growth coalition. I could go on. Yeah. I've heard the speech before, I have to say.
But she found the pig. She slaughtered the pig. She took the pig to market. So that was her acceptance. So she tried to do too much too quick. To be fair,
there's probably the furthest that she's gone on accepting that she did kind of cock it all up a little bit and said she was trying to do too much too fast. She tried to do 2 years' work in 2 weeks. But still, no humility. Opening with a joke about this being a calmer September, obviously clipped within seconds by the Labour Party saying, I'm glad you're having a calm September when 145,000 more people have been remortgaged in the month of September, whatever the stat was, but it was very quick as you can. Gold for the opposition, heads being banged on walls in Downing Street. But she's not going away. She, I think, feels wronged. She isn't going to give the bully boys that she thinks forced her out the pleasure of her walking off into the sunset. She's going to stick around, and basically she basically said today, look, there have been 25 years of consensus on one side of the argument. I tried to unpick that in two weeks. Obviously, that didn't work. I'm going to stick around for 25 years and try and unpick it. So if you thought you saw the last of her, you ain't.
Well, she's obviously determined to be the Tory beacon for lower taxes and smaller government, and that hasn't changed. But I think what her appearance did today, more than anything, was remind us of this time last year, and that's why people in Number 10 were banging their heads on the wall, because last year there was utter chaos unleashed by her mini budget. The economy tanked. We had the most chaotic Conservative Party conference that probably I've ever seen.
There.
As a journalist, maybe not as a government, as a Tory MP, and she came across as being utterly unrepentant. And I think that was the thing which I think will stick in a lot of people's craw. Yeah. The fact that she seems to be able to blame everyone other than herself, that it was like a presentational problem rather than an issue of substance. And I think that it's just really bad PR for the Tory party, frankly. And the fact that she has said that she's going to come to Conservative Party conference where, still there are plenty of Tory grassroots who backed her overwhelmingly, who will be, she wants to speak to and kind of G them up again. I mean, Number 10 must be thinking, what the hell's she up to?
I think also the lack of humility and the lack of sort of self-awareness actually mask some quite important points she did make about the fact there's been no inquiry into the Bank of England or the Treasury or the pensions market about the fact that our financial system was that unstable. And she did say, if I'd known that at the time, if I'd been told that at the time, we would have gone slower. The fact that she fired the guy that would probably have been the person that would told her, Tom Scholar, the head of the Treasury, is one thing. But there is a very valid point there that actually we were in an over sort of exposed position as a country, and everyone's just slightly brushed that under the carpet. And it's very easy for the Bank of England to blame the politicians when actually, if you look at their consistent failings on managing to keep inflation at 2.5%, which is their legally mandated goal, they haven't done that. But they've had the perfect distraction in Liz, who's been able to be the lightning rod for all the failures. But actually, I think the most valid point that you made today that failure has, should have many owners.
Yeah, and they're modelling as well of the Bank of England.
Indeed.
Just very, very quickly, in 30 seconds, also on the front page of The Guardian, in fact, build HS2 as promised, North's leaders tell Number 10, while Labour says they're going to go all the way to Leeds if they win the next election.
Yeah, that was an expensive, one person of Labour. There's a very expensive interview, I think, today.
£7 billion interview.
Especially after the weekend when Pat McFadden said that they'd have to see the cost of the extension before they committed to it. And the bottom line is HS2 looks like is on the table, the extension of it. Obviously, the government are weighing up all the big spending commitments, and they may not be able to go ahead with all of them, including HS2.